For 700 years, this land belonged to everyone except the people who actually lived on it. Kingdoms rose and fell around it, but the land itself and its people endured through every ruler. After Kiev fell to the Mongols in 1240, these lands never fully recovered their old unity. Small regional princes clung to what power they could, but none could reunite the old Rus lands. Instead, one power after another would claim these lands as their own. For the next 7 centuries, Lithuanians, Poles, Russians, Austrians, each would rule, tax, and reshape these lands in their own image. Borders would shift again and again, sometimes redrawn by treaties, sometimes carved out by war. And yet, through all of it, a distinct people, language, and culture never disappeared. Language, folk songs, religious traditions, and a shared memory of Kiev's golden age kept that identity alive. So how does a nation survive 700 years without a state of its own? That's today's story. In the power vacuum left by the Mongols, a new player expanded rapidly from the north, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Unlike the Mongols, the Lithuanian dukes were not interested in destruction. They wanted stable, productive territory. Lithuanian dukes absorbed most of the former Rus principalities, including Kiev itself, often without a single battle. Local Rus princes often simply swore loyalty to Vilnius in exchange for keeping their lands and titles. For a while, local Rus nobility kept much of their language, religion, and customs under this new rule. Old Slavic legal codes, like the Ruskaya Pravda from Kievan Rus, even continued to influence Lithuanian law. But everything changed in 1569 with a single treaty, the Union of Lublin. Facing pressure from a rising Russia to the east, Lithuania's nobles sought closer ties with the powerful kingdom of Poland. Lithuania and Poland merged into a single commonwealth, and most Ukrainian lands were transferred directly to Polish control. Almost overnight, the administrative center of gravity shifted from Vilnius to Warsaw and Krakow. Polish nobles received vast new estates, and the free Ukrainian peasants who lived there became their serfs. Within a generation, most of the free farmers who had once worked their own land found themselves owned, in all but name. Serfdom meant peasants were bound to the land, forced into unpaid labor, with almost no legal rights of their own. A noble could buy, sell, or punish his serfs almost however he wished, with little fear of consequence. Along with serfdom came growing pressure to convert from Orthodox Christianity to the Roman Catholic faith of the new rulers. This religious pressure created a deep and lasting divide between Ukrainian peasants and their Polish Catholic landlords. Language, land, faith, and freedom, all were slipping away from ordinary Ukrainians under this new order. Resentment simmered quietly for decades until it finally found an outlet in the wild frontier to the south. But not everyone accepted this fate quietly. In the wild frontier lands to the south, a new identity was forming. Runaway serfs, adventurers, and free men gathered beyond the reach of any king in the wild lands along the Dnieper. The name Cossack itself came from a Turkic word meaning free man or adventurer. They called themselves Cossacks, free warriors who built a fortified base known as the Zaporizhian Sich. Surrounded by river rapids and dense forest, this natural fortress was almost impossible for any army to besiege. Here, Cossacks elected their own leaders, made their own laws, and answered to no foreign king. This democratic military brotherhood became legendary, a symbol of freedom that still resonates in Ukrainian culture today. For a growing number of oppressed peasants, joining the Cossacks meant one thing above all: freedom. But this freedom came at a price. A life of constant warfare, raiding, and danger along a violent frontier. In 1648, tensions finally exploded. A Cossack leader named Bohdan Khmelnytsky launched a massive uprising against Polish rule. Khmelnytsky had personal grievances too. Polish officials had seized his estate and abused his family. Cossack forces won stunning victories, driving Polish armies out of much of Ukraine within just a few years. He allied with Crimean Tatar horsemen, combining Cossack infantry tactics with devastating cavalry raids. For the first time in centuries, it looked like an independent Ukrainian state might actually be possible. Khmelnytsky even began negotiating as the leader of an independent Cossack hetmanate, a state in all but formal recognition. But Khmelnytsky needed a powerful ally to secure his gains, and in 1654, he turned to Russia. Poland was regrouping. The Ottoman Empire and Crimean Tatars were unreliable allies. Russia offered shared Orthodox faith and real military strength. At the Treaty of Pereyaslav, Cossack Ukraine placed itself under the protection of the Russian Tsar. Cossack representatives swore loyalty to the Tsar, while Moscow promised to respect their existing rights and autonomy. To this day, historians fiercely debate what this treaty actually meant: a military alliance or the beginning of the end of Cossack independence. In the decades that followed, Moscow steadily chipped away at those promised autonomies, one small step at a time. Whatever its true meaning, one thing was certain: Ukrainian lands were now firmly pulled into Russia's orbit. Over the following century, Ukraine's fate would be decided by forces far larger than any Cossack army. Ukraine had become a borderland in the truest sense, caught between rising and falling empires on every side. In the late 1700s, the once mighty Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth collapsed, carved up by its more powerful neighbors. In three separate partitions between 1772 and 1795, Russia, Prussia, and Austria divided Polish-Lithuanian territory among themselves. Most Ukrainian lands, including Kiev, fell under the direct control of the Russian Empire. But one western region, Galicia, was instead absorbed into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a divide that would shape Ukraine for generations. This east-west divide would echo for centuries, visible even in the political maps of Ukraine today. In the Russian-controlled East, the imperial government pursued a clear goal: erasing any distinct Ukrainian identity. Officially, the empire referred to Ukraine as Malorossiya, or Little Russia, denying it was a separate nation at all. In 1863, the Valuev Circular declared that a separate Ukrainian language never existed, does not exist, and cannot exist. This official denial, in writing, is now studied by historians as a textbook example of state-driven cultural erasure. Ukrainian books were banned. Ukrainian language schools were shut down. Even public performances in Ukrainian were forbidden. Even simple folk theater troupes performing in the Ukrainian language could be shut down by imperial police. In 1876, the EMS ukaz went even further, banning the import and printing of Ukrainian language books entirely. Even sheet music with Ukrainian lyrics and translations of foreign literature into Ukrainian fell under the ban. This wasn't just cultural policy, it was a deliberate attempt to erase the idea that Ukrainians were a separate people at all. And yet, in villages far from the capital, Ukrainian songs, stories, and traditions kept quietly passing from parent to child. Meanwhile, just across the border in Austrian-ruled Galicia, the story was strikingly different. This wasn't out of pure generosity. Austria-Hungary hoped a loyal Ukrainian minority could help balance out Polish influence in the region. Austro-Hungarian authorities, seeking loyalty from their many ethnic minorities, allowed far greater cultural and political freedom. Ukrainian language newspapers, schools, and even political parties were allowed to legally operate in Galicia. Ironically, it was here, under a foreign Austrian crown, that modern Ukrainian national identity truly began to flourish. Lviv, the region's largest city, became a genuine hub of Ukrainian intellectual and cultural life. Writers, poets, and scholars in Galicia began collecting folk songs, publishing grammar books, and reviving the Ukrainian language. Scholars standardized Ukrainian spelling and grammar, turning a patchwork of dialects into a modern literary language. The poet Taras Shevchenko became a towering symbol, his poetry giving voice to a nation still without a state. His most famous poems mourned Ukraine's lost freedom, while calling on future generations to reclaim it. Even under bans and censorship, this cultural awakening quietly crossed the border back into Russian-ruled Ukraine. Books smuggled across the border, and students who studied in Lviv carried this cultural revival eastward. By the early 1900s, a new generation of Ukrainians, East and West, increasingly saw themselves as one people. Political movements began openly calling not just for cultural rights, but for genuine Ukrainian self-governance. And then, in 1917, the impossible happened. The mighty Russian Empire itself began to collapse. Weakened by years of war and growing unrest, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate his throne in February 1917. Revolution swept across the empire, and for the first time in centuries, Ukrainian independence suddenly seemed within reach. In Kiev, Ukrainian leaders quickly formed a new political body, the Central Rada, or Central Council. For the first time since the fall of Kievan Rus, Ukrainians themselves would get to decide their own future. 700 years without a state of their own, and now, finally, a chance to build one. But as we'll see next time, that chance would collide head-on with an even darker chapter of history. If this story of resilience moved you, hit subscribe. Ukraine's history is only getting more intense from here. What do you think the Pereyaslav Treaty really meant? Let us know in the comments below.